Hi, everybody. It's Michelle Hill, your legacy builder at Winning Proof, and I am here today with another Winning Proof Unscripted. And I have a special guest, Dr. Natasha Trujillo, and I am going to read her bio as I always do so I can get everything right. And I'm going to tell people, if you hear a buzzy sound in the back, there's a lawnmower going up and down the complex. So just life happens. And that's it. So, okay. Let me go back up here. Okay. Dr. Trujillo is a licensed counseling and sports psychologist who obtained her doctorate degree from Purdue University in counseling psychology in 2019, where she built specialties in grief and loss and self-injury, and then she worked to address mental health needs and assess and access to services with collegiate athletes. She completed her APA accredited internship and postdoctoral study at the University of Northern Colorado, where she provided individual, group consultation, and crisis support services in both the counseling center with the general campus community and in the athletics department, working with individuals, teams, coaches, and administration. She also has her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling and 2 bachelor's degrees from the University of Wyoming, and I'm going to cover that. She now specializes primarily in grief loss, eating disorders, trauma, life transitions, and performance concerns. Dr. Trujillo is a member of the Big Sky Sports Psychology Group and Collegiate Clinical Counseling Sports Psychology Association and the American Psychological Association's Division 47. Dr. Trujillo, that is a mouthful, and you are so educated. Tell viewers how you originally got interested, your interest kind of originated in sports psychology and counseling. Give us a little background.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. So long story short, I think I'd always kind of been interested in human behavior and relationships and people. And so I initially got interested in psychology just as a whole, and I wanted to better understand why people think the way they think and why they do what they do. So entered the field that way. And then I was a lifelong athlete. I played basketball competitively for about 12 years. And I had a slew of experiences through that, a lot of them being connected to grief and loss. So once I found out that I could actually specialize in working with mental health needs for athletic populations, I was pretty much sold. So I did some work in residential treatment facilities before that and before I decided to get my doctorate degree. And so that was really great in helping me understand trauma a little bit better and kind of build some of my interests around trauma and self-injury and some of those pieces, and then just kind of fell into grief and loss. And it all seemed to fit really well and speak to a lot of needs that were present in athletic environments too.
Yes, and you have so many degrees. Do you just love school? Do you love learning? What is it?
Absolutely, yes. I joked once I was done with my PhD, I joked with my friends and family, like, all right, is it med school now or law school? And they were all like, oh my goodness. But yeah, I think I just have a natural curiosity. And when you embark on a field like psychology, I think you have to make a commitment to being a lifelong learner. It just never stops, right? Every new client you encounter, every new experience, there's going to be some different nuances and just different ways to expand how we can best serve other people. So yeah, you do kind of have to have a lifelong commitment, and I have not completely ruled out law school yet either. So
okay, well, maybe this year.
Yeah, who knows?
Okay, so I want to ask you too, what trends are you currently seeing in the sports world regarding mental health? Because I know it has come to the forefront more as of late. So what trends are you seeing?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Well, it's really timely that we're talking today too, just with what happened in the NFL last night. Monday Night Football, Damar Hamlin, still in critical condition as far as I know. And I watched a couple hours of commentary afterwards, and they really did speak to the importance of mental health, and that sports, at the end of the day, sometimes you have to put the sport aside and just take care of the people. And so it's nice to, and I do think that is one of the trends, is a little bit more discussion and focus just being placed on mental health in general. For athletes. I specialize in working with athletes with eating disorders. And so in that world, or in that realm, I see so much perfectionism, a ton of body image distress, and a lot of misperceptions about what an ideal athlete body is supposed to look like. So there's a lot of obsessions and compulsions and restrictive behaviors focused on controlling and trying to modify body shape and weight. When I was working in college athletics too, I think I saw a lot of trends related to sleep problems.
Wow. Okay.
Oh my gosh, yes, their schedules, right? A college athlete schedule is so intense. Every minute is booked, and sleep is often kind of placed aside because you got to get up for your 5 or 6 a.m. lifting sessions, or you need to cram for an exam. Even though they know that's not good for them, they still spend a fair amount of time doing that. And so I think sleep was a huge issue. Anxiety was a huge issue. And then I would say there were a ton of identity concerns as well. Mm-hmm. So the life of an athlete, right? You do go through so many transitions, and so much grief and loss. And through that, your identity can really be challenged and questioned. And so I think that was a lot of what I work with now, with athletes in different stages of their career, moving from high school to college, from college to pro, from sport out of sport, just retiring from sport altogether. So a lot of identity stuff wrapped up in that. A lot of athletes just don't know who they are outside of their sport because they've spent so much time and energy focused on becoming better at it.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I have, my website designer is a former NFL player, Fred Vinson, and he was a cornerback for the Packers back in the day. And he said his, he said one of the most quotable things that I think I have quoted through the years is that if you don't know who you are going into, let's just say the NFL, you won't know who you are coming out. And that's a real hard transition for some of the athletes, where you go to the grocery store now and nobody recognizes you, and you're used to accolades, you're used to all that. And that is a huge identity crisis.
Oh, for sure. And I think self-worth is really tied in there too, right? A lot of athletes do hang their self-worth on their achievements and how far they go in their sports. And when they've achieved all they can and they step out of their sport, it's kind of like, not only who am I, but what is my worth? So, and then of course the grief and loss interwoven in all of that is.
Yes. Now, do you find is it pretty evenly divided between men and women who experience all that? Is there a tipping point where it's more women, more men?
I would say it's absolutely gender inclusive. At the end of the day, all athletes are humans too, regardless of gender identity, right? And so sometimes gender identity might intersect with different aspects of their life and create distress in other ways or barriers in other ways. But yeah, I would not say that I see more of one certain issue in any, even with eating disorders, right? I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about eating disorders being a primarily female related thing. And I do not think that is the case. I've worked with all genders in terms of eating disorders. I think some genders are studied more, or maybe certain problems are emphasized or connected more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the true statistics reflect that too.
That's true. And, going into my next question, I don't know if you can, but I wanted to bring up share my screen, but I am not going to try that on a Zoom. And so, on a regular Zoom, yes. On a podcast, no, it's not queued up. Maybe you can talk about it. It's on your LinkedIn page, and it says your trauma is valid, even if, and I'll just quickly go through these, and maybe you can, talk about them more, but it says your trauma is valid even if other people have experienced worse. It happened a long time ago. You've never told anyone. You don't remember all of it. Someone says, it's not that big a deal. And you are feeling much better now. And you say, I really like this, what you said. If you have ever doubted or downplayed your trauma because you've chosen not to tell anyone, you can't remember all the details, or someone tells you it isn't a big deal, you are not in solidarity. It's imperative to remind yourself that you matter, your pain matters, your experience matters, and your healing matters. Start this new year by breaking the tendency to compare trauma. Give yourself a safe space within to begin your healing journey, and please don't underplay how much grief and loss is wrapped up in trauma. So my question is, with all that backdrop, why do people minimize and discount their trauma? It's like almost everybody does that.
Oh man. Yeah. So I decided to come up with that post because so anytime I'm looking at what I'm going to post, I kind of reflect back on my work that week with my own clients and like what are themes, and I do a lot of trauma work. And this is just something that I hear all the time where people will say I should be over it by now, or it's not as bad as this person's trauma that I know. And so there's a lot of invalidation, a lack of self-compassion, and just not, people don't give themselves room to process and really just kind of acknowledge where that comes from. And so I find that when we're able to create a space in therapy where we can do that for them, we start to see things open up in different ways. So to answer your question, why do I think it is discounted? And I think there's a lot of stigma, even around the word trauma.
Yeah.
I don't think that people like to connect with that word or like to admit those things because it's unpleasant. It's hard. Trauma is trauma. It is challenging. I also think just perceptions, external cues, and what is and is not acceptable on a societal level, or even within different communities and systems that we function in, can contribute to some of that discounting or minimizing too. You know, if you share something and get shut down, it only takes one time for someone to be like, oh yeah, I guess this doesn't matter as much, or I guess I can't really say this. So I think there's a lot in the environment that can kind of cue that up for people. I think with athletes specifically too, just with the mindset of perseverance and push through, and you got to just keep going. I think sometimes the way we try to almost put too positive of a spin on things sometimes can also contribute to that discounting and minimizing.
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of people who have experienced trauma and loss say, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. You know, and what I want to tell them is, and I'm not the expert, you know, but I want to tell them it's okay to say you're not okay, you know.
Absolutely.
And I'll be fine. I'll be fine. But it's okay if you're not.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and I appreciate that positivity coming in, and people thinking, okay, you know, I will be okay and I will get through this. And yes, that is likely true. However, you're not okay right now. And what we're dealing with is where you are right now. And yeah, so I think that can be a nice just little reminder that good to have goals, good to want to work through it and recognize that there will be something on the other side for you. And at the same time, it's okay to not be okay. And that's where you are right now.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And again, athletes, you know, have a special set of circumstances that they deal with because some of them have been coddled since 3 years old, since they had athletic talent, and that huge grief and loss area. But I want to kind of turn a corner. And I know we talked about this in our introductory call when we just were, you know, meeting on LinkedIn and say, oh, hey, hi.
Yeah.
But I wanted to revisit it really briefly today about grief and loss, because you said, like, okay, some of us, and I'm saying this, some of us, including myself, haven't lost people who are still living. And talk a little bit about the process and how it's different, or if it's different from losing someone to death.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, so there is a new term that was kind of coined to talk about losses in life, not losses of life, by a thanatologist who's wonderful, Cole Imperi. Oh my gosh, love Cole. And this idea of shadow losses, again, is that we can experience grief and loss that is not necessarily connected to a death. And so I think that in and of itself is a really important point to make, because I work with a lot of people who are grieving things. And when I will share that with them, that, you know, this is grief, this is a process that you're going through right now, they're like, huh, well, nobody died. I didn't know that I could grieve the loss of this promotion that I wanted, or that I could grieve this breakup, even though the person is still here. So I do think there are some differences, but I think there are also a lot of similarities, because loss is loss. I do think that sometimes there can be a challenge in figuring out how to move forward when there is still opportunity, given that the person is still alive, right? So you could reconnect at any time. Every day is potentially a new opportunity. And so I think that can at times make the grief process more challenging, because there's hope involved, or maybe wishing. Yeah, that attachment is still there in a different way when you know for certain that somebody is permanently gone. So I think that can complicate things. I think this is true for death loss as well, but there can be some subtle differences in how other people respond. You know, get over it. It's just a breakup.
Yeah.
And at times, even with death losses, people will say, hey, it's, you know, it's been a year, it's been 6 months, or so I think that there's a little bit of that in both. But I think it can just be understated, and grief can kind of be minimized or pushed to the side when it's just a loss in life rather than of life. It doesn't seem for some as though the gravity is as impactful. Yet I know, you know, even with losses in life, sometimes we feel all of those psychosomatic symptoms, right? Where sometimes it physically hurts to move, to get up and to live in your life, and to see the sun or trees or things that used to bring a lot of happiness and joy can truly be sucked out of life, even if the person is still living.
Yes. Yeah. And like you said, it's not only maybe losing people that are still alive, but it's, like you said, losing maybe a dream, a big, huge dream that you had. And then you come to the realization and the reality that this dream is not going to happen. That's a loss as well. But people, again, tend to minimize that, because it's just like, oh, people are dealing with so much more serious stuff than me, you know, and we tell ourselves, just get over it. You're being a baby. You're being trivial and all that. And we just need to stop that, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Validation goes a long way. And again, all of those things can be so connected to identity as well. So yes, we might be grieving the loss of another person, or the loss of a promotion or a job, or, you know, whatever the example is, but all of those things are going to influence who we think we are and who we want to become, and shift that path that we thought we were on. So there are a lot of things to grieve. It's not just the primary loss of losing a special someone. It's everything else you had kind of thought about, planned, hoped for, that is connected to that too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I really am fascinated by that particular area, you know, just from a personal perspective. But I want to shift the focus, because we've been talking about, you know, grief and loss, and, you know, and that's some heavy subjects that people deal with every day. But yes. I want to know what excites you the most about what you do.
I mean, it's kind of an interesting segue, because I love getting to focus so much on grief and loss, even though it is a really heavy topic. I think that in my field, what excites me the most is that I get to create relationships and spaces with people who address things that they don't feel comfortable addressing with other people, or that are maybe difficult or awkward or not socially acceptable to bring up. And so I just love being able to create that space. And I love being able to be alongside people and watch transformations happen, you know, watch someone who hates their body and doesn't eat regularly or harms themselves in so many ways around trying to modify their body, learn over time to develop healthy relationships with food and with exercise and with themselves, and learn to reconnect with people. Or somebody who has such high unrealistic expectations and standards for themselves start to practice more flexibility and more laughter, right? Even being able to laugh at themselves and start to expand their perception of self-worth and how they measure self-worth and what kind of life they want to live for themselves. And even identity work too, watching someone who doesn't necessarily know themselves very well at the beginning really get to learn who they are and learn how different parts of them work together, maybe sometimes work against each other. So yeah, just getting to watch these transformations is, I think, that keeps me the most engaged and excited about the work that I do. I also love being able to work in circles where, like athletics, for example, where mental health isn't necessarily as normalized, or there are mindsets within certain environments that aren't the most helpful for promoting a healthy relationship with yourself from a mental perspective. So I really like being able to kind of educate and start to just shift things, right? Change the scene a little bit. It's been really, really cool to see that in all different levels.
Yeah, what a mission. That is a real mission. It's your vocation, it's your career, but it really is has a bigger mission attached to it, because you really are changing people's lives. Because what do they say? They say, the famous group of people none of us know, they say that, change your thoughts, change your life. But that really is true, because you experience that all the time when you help people shift their mindset from one area, from a negative space to a positive space.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
Yes.
It really is fun. It keeps me energized.
Yes. So can you anonymously share, without a lot of, without any identifying details, can you share like a breakthrough that you had with one of your clients that you were working with?
Oh, sure. Okay, so worked with an athlete who retired from sport. So I started working with her right as she was transitioning. So I'd kind of just graduated, moved to a new place. So was no longer competing, really struggled. A pretty significant eating disorder was at play that had been throughout all of college, and was developed in college. So very connected to sport and sport performance. And then there was also a fair amount of depression, fair amount of anxiety, incredibly perfectionistic thoughts. Was in a pretty dark place. And again, a lot of identity stuff, right? If I'm not playing my sport anymore, who am I? What do I do? I didn't have the career that I wanted to have athletically. So some grief and loss just in perceived missed opportunities there too. And it's just been incredible to see her start to, first and foremost, we kind of focused on the eating disorder and kind of taking care of basic needs, because it's harder to do some of the more self-actualized work if someone's not sleeping, if someone's not eating, and that's regulated. So we really hit that hard first. And as she was able to build a better relationship with her body and with food, and work through some of the trauma associated with comments that had been made and things that she had done throughout her career athletically to change her body, then we were able to kind of move into tackling some of her thoughts and why the perfectionism was so ingrained. What were those beliefs underneath all of that, and how was her self-worth tied up in that? And now she was kind of given this whole opportunity, because she wasn't in sport, to figure out, well, what do I do now, right? What do I want to do? And so it has just been amazing to see her move into her career path, build some new relationships, and most importantly, build a different relationship with herself, where she has truly been able to modify her belief system. We talk a lot about values, and we want people to know their values and to live through their values, but sometimes our values need to be changed too. Sometimes our values are a little counterproductive to what we need to be successful and to like ourselves. And so that doesn't mean we need to completely throw every value out the window, but for her, it was just being able to recognize, where are my values or my beliefs doing more harm than good, and how can I still be a hard worker, but not to the point where I'm harming myself and super depressed and don't like anything that I do.
Yeah, and I think
So,
so many
she's
people.
thriving now.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Good. And I love that. I'd love to hear that, someone who has done the work, because if it was easy, everybody would just breeze through the process and just be, I'm better, I'm good, I have new values, all this stuff. But it takes work and discipline and reprogramming and putting on when that old, and I'll use an old term, record, when the classic, the LP, when the faulty record plays and it has skips and scratches in it, replace that faulty self-talk with some, what we tell ourselves sometimes, and the self-critical part of us. We would never tell a friend if they came to us with the same problem. We would show compassion and empathy, and yet we don't do that for ourselves. So I'm really glad to hear that she did the work. And
definitely. Yeah.
That's excellent. Now I want to kind of wrap up with, there's one super exciting thing that, I'm super excited about because of my industry, and that I have to mention before we end our time. You're writing your first book on grief and loss. So tell the viewers more about that.
Yes. So, I'd been playing with this idea since graduate school. And when I graduated, I needed to take a break from writing after the dissertation piece. But again, focusing clinically on what I focus on, and the more stories I hear, there still seems to be just huge gaps of understanding and knowledge for the general public about grief and loss and different types of grief, and even the difference between things like grief, mourning, bereavement, just the terms that we use to describe some of this. And so I wanted to be able to fill that hole where I can paint a picture of different types of loss that are varied, right? Not just death loss. So the book will cover, each chapter is a different type of loss entirely, and be able to pull at the heartstrings. I mean, that really is an intention, is to be able to write a story where you can put yourself in the shoes of any character and really feel some of what that loss might be like, and then kind of synthesize some information. So I'm not quoting research studies. It's not outlined like an educational textbook, but of course I'm using some of that knowledge to kind of synthesize and talk through how those experiences change not only an individual, but intergenerationally, how they might change a whole family system and that sort of thing. So stories from my life and people close to me. So I'm kind of a thread in the book. But yeah, trying to cover a lot of ground in different types of losses and different experiences that are often inevitable, but we won't all experience every type of loss that's featured in the book. And that's very intentional.
Okay. I'm so excited about that. And do you have an anticipated release month?
Oh my gosh. So I've got about 4 or 5 chapters left to finish. So I'm hoping to be done kind of April, May with that final draft.
Okay.
And then really kind of moving into the process of all that is involved in the publishing world. So maybe end of 2023, beginning of 2024. So it's still a ways out, but we're getting there slowly but surely.
A little bit at a time. That's right. And you want, and I'll add this in, and I'm not plugging, what I do, but just as a first-time author, this is your brand. This book on grief and loss is part of your brand, and it does take time to make it into a professional grade book, not just a pile of pages that you threw together, no editing, no nothing, just throw it into the Amazon pile. It takes a lot more than that. And I'm glad you're taking time to work through it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel very privileged to have been on a grief and loss research team in my doc program, and to have worked under one of the best. And so being able to have that resource, and yeah, my plan is definitely to try to connect with some colleagues and make sure that I'm doing it justice, right? It's just a really important area. It's completely inevitable. Every human on the planet will be able to relate in some way. So, and I may or may not have a little bit of perfectionism myself. So it needs to be in good shape when it's done.
That's not a bad thing when you're producing a book, to have a little string of perfectionism running through it, because I see a lot that don't have that, and those end up in my library giveaway pile or my Goodwill giveaway pile, because I can't have them on my shelf.
Yeah. Yeah. I will try to keep my perfectionism in check, but yeah, you use some of the good aspects of it.
Yeah. So what I want, my final question is, how can people connect with you on social media or any place else?
Oh my gosh, yes. So I do have an Instagram and a LinkedIn. And then I also have a website, so you can connect with me on my website. My phone number is on there, my email, and then I have Calendly as well, so people can just kind of get on and schedule based on my availability some time to chat. So yeah, a few different mediums there to get in touch.
Wonderful. And I will put all those links in the notes and the show notes, so anybody that looks at this podcast can link, can see all those notes and everything like that. So I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It was so like uplifting and positive, even though it's grief and loss, but you make it positive in the way you approach it. I really like your approach. So I thank you for being a guest and for sharing your time today.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I am going to end here. I am Michelle Hill, your legacy builder at Winning Proof, and you can visit my website at winningproof.com. And I am on all the social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I did my first reel today. That took a half hour of 50,000 retakes, but we're okay. I had to let go of perfectionism. So yes. Until next time, thank you for watching another episode of Winning Proof Unscripted.